My name is Miriam of Magdalene. My name, Miriam, or Mary, speaks volumes to the way of life in which I lived, for it literally means rebellious, and that I was in every sense of the word. Growing up in the small fishing village of Magdalene, I had dreams of going anywhere but there. But that was unheard of for a woman of my time to go out and see the world. I didn't want to be stuck in Magdalene for the rest of my life. So I began to find trouble and rebel against my mother and my father and against my God. My father had finally had enough and cast me out. Oh, I was going to go see the world, all right, but not in the way I had imagined, without my father's blessing and without his money. I had to beg, borrow, then steal for food, for shelter. For long in desperation, I turned to harlotry to survive. I'm not proud of what I did, the choices I made. I didn't think things could get any worse, but I was wrong. The lifestyle of sin I was living opened the door wide to the evil one. Before I knew what had hit me, I found myself possessed by 7 demons. Demons with names like hate, lust, greed, sorcery, immorality, depression. They worked together to make my life miserable. Every waking moment, they tormented me. They haunted my dreams. There was no rest. I can't tell you what it's like when your thoughts are not your own. Your mind turns against you. I became weak and physically ill with their presence. I was shunned, cast out, alone, frightened. Children threw stones and mothers turned their children away from me. This was no kind of life. Not one worth living. I cried out, God, if you're there, one small act of mercy, I plead, take my life, for I lack the courage to take my own. He didn't answer that prayer, not in the way in which I wanted it to be answered. For he had plans for me, plans for a new life, life in his Son. For it was not long after that dark, dark day, I was resting in the shade of a tent near the marketplace. And I heard this commotion. People shouting, Jesus is coming, Jesus! Bring the sick, for he can heal. Now, I had heard of this man, this Jesus. I had heard of the miracles he performed, people he healed. I had heard he could make the lame walk again. I had heard he could turn water into wine. I heard he fed a multitude of people with one poised lunch. Well, I can't believe half of what you hear. But what if? What if half of it was true? Could this man have true power and authority from the living God? Could he help someone like me? There was only one way to find out, so I picked myself up and dusted myself off, and I made my way to the crowd that was forming around him. I had heard this woman had just touched his robe, and she was healed. Perhaps if I could get close enough to touch him, to speak to him, this was my last hope. The crowd was thick, pressed in around Jesus. I couldn't even see him. Normally, I would have never got close enough, but, well, no one wanted to be touched by me, so they made way. I worked my way in through the crowd. And then I saw him. I saw him standing there, and he was talking. I stood rooted in my tracks, for such a man as this I had never seen before. And his words, they flowed like honey. I was mesmerized by the sight and the sound of him. If only I could get a little closer, and closer still. And suddenly, the hatred, the darkness, the evil inside of me welled up, and the voices started again. "You're not worthy," they said. "What are you thinking? He won't speak to you. No one wants to be around you. You're worthless. Your sins are unforgivable. You'll never be more than a harlot." Maybe they were right. I am worthless. Things I have done, they are unforgivable. What was I thinking? Suddenly I couldn't breathe, and I felt as if the crowd was pressing around me, and I had to go. I had to leave. The guilt was overwhelming. Turning to flee, I heard him speak. I turned, for it seemed as if he was speaking to me. "Daughter, come," he said. "Come to me." He was speaking to me. The evil raged up inside of me and fought for control. "No, leave me alone! Leave me alone! Please, help me! Help me!" Jesus reached out his hand to me, and he spoke to the evil within me. "Come out of her!" he commanded. And out of his command they fled like a bolt of lightning from my toes to the top of my head. They left just like that. The weeks and weeks of torment gone in an instant. The weight upon my shoulders lifted, and I felt free at last. Oh, such relief. My mind was my own again. I felt the strength returning to my body. Oh Lord, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I would have sat at Jesus' feet forever if I could have. But he had lessons to teach and others to help. So he left me in the care of the women who were following him. And they took me in. They gave me food and shelter, fresh clothing. And they told me everything I had heard was true.